bus ride. And it's funny.
Right.
So today I was thinking if we can talk about something that a lot of people struggle with, me included, and I'm gonna confidently make an assumption and say that everyone here has experienced in some way, shape, or form, and that's burnout,
Yeah.
right? So let's kind of explore a little bit about what burnout is and see
Mm-hmm.
kind of what comes up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that drives someone to the point where suddenly the match goes off and there's just embers and smoke?
Mm-hmm.
What comes up for you guys? Like, what drives that, in your opinions?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I mean, I can also like own my own relationship with burnout. I have to watch myself very carefully with that. I think for me, it's like my needs. It's something to do with needs. It's something to do with burying needs, repressing needs below the surface, and sort of pushing oneself towards some kind of externally demanded expectation. For me, it's about a kind of a real internal disconnect with what's going on in me, and sort of this being driven to push myself past a certain point, um, which I find very interesting. What do you think, Paige?
I've been thinking, excuse me, a lot about this because we all in our work with clients, I think, tackle this issue to a certain extent,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I've been thinking about this more from like an existential
Mm-hmm.
kind of perspective because I think the way we often think about burnout is it's like a surplus of stress.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I've started to think about it is maybe it's not so much a surplus of stress as much as it is like a loss of meaning
Right.
and purpose.
Like a disconnection.
What you were saying, yes, disconnection, right?
Yeah.
When our work no longer feels purposeful or
It's
aligned
interesting.
with something bigger, right? And it's funny because I think the way I've always thought about this in terms of trying to help clients or mental health counseling students is to put it on the individual, right? Engage in more self-care, take accountability, prioritize yourself. But I think that in doing that, we can sometimes miss something bigger at work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reality is that there are some people who can thrive under stress, right? And still feel purpose. Think about like ER physicians and, people that do trauma work. I mean, they're under a great deal of physical stress and exhaustion, but they derive a lot of meaning and purpose
Right.
from the work they do.
Right.
So what happens when we lose that?
Uh-huh.
It brings up. So have you guys ever heard of this word, Ikigai, Ikigai?
Yeah,
Yes, I just read a book.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a Japanese word.
Yeah.
Yes, I
That's
just
right.
read that book.
It's a Japanese philosophy. It's an idea. It essentially is the act of doing the thing that provides you purpose and meaning in life. And there's four categories for it. So one is it's something that you are good at. So it's an ability, right? Then there's the thing that you love to do, right? So now we have more of a funnel, right? I do a lot of things, but which one of those things do I love?
Right.
And then the third one is, what does the world need? So then there's a community aspect to this. So there's the things I can do, the things that I love to do, and then the things that I love to do that the world needs. And then the last one is self-sufficiency, right? Like, can I get paid for this? Can I do this thing that I love to do that the world needs? And can I get paid for it? And it brings about, like you're saying, like this sense of connection, this sense of meaning and purpose. I'm doing this and I'm stressed and I'm working, but there's something that's feeding me back.
Right. Yeah. No, I understand exactly. I really appreciate that because I think it's got something to do with meeting all of who we are. Like when we get out of balance and we're just sort of chasing after, meeting expectations and disconnecting with different aspects of ourselves. And I really hear what you're saying about the sort of deeper drive to have meaning and purpose and for something to fill us and not only be draining us, but to actually feel that we're nourished by something. I think it's got to do with the kind of like disconnecting from, we might be, maybe we're over involved with service and disconnecting from those other aspects of like meaning or what this is, doing for the world, all the different aspects that you spoke about. So interesting, because perhaps if we are meeting all those sort of needs that we have, that we will be able to maintain more balance, and not run out of steam, run out of energy. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah, and I think that it also implies that to really tackle burnout requires knowing ourselves, right? Knowing what our values are. Because I think what you were saying is like there's a certain misalignment that happens between what we value internally and what we're doing out in the world. Right? And when there's too big of a space between what we value and what we're doing in the world, then how do we find purpose and meaning? And at some point we're going to get bored, we're going to feel burnout, we're going to feel what's the point, right? Because when you talk to people who say, I think I'm burned out, what do they often say? What's the point of what I'm doing? I'm not helping. It feels pointless. I feel numb and disconnected, like all the things that we're saying.
So the ticket then is trying to find, like, I like the way that you placed it there, where it's when the distance between the thing that you're doing and the meaning, right? So we have to find a way to tether these things, right? Because in all the things we do, like, we love what we do in terms of providing that kind of therapeutic service for people. But there are aspects of it. Like for me, documentation, absolute killer, 100%.
Yeah.
And that is the bane of many therapists' existences. But being able to tie it, I had somebody years ago, and it helps shifting a perspective where it's, if you can tie it to, okay, I don't appreciate doing this documentation, but this documentation could mean the difference between a person being able to have insurance provide them some kind of support financially so that they can continue treatment or not.
Yeah, so in other words, it has meaning, it has like gravitas, it has something that's important about it.
I think back to something that you said once upon a time in one of the last recordings, where it was the glimmers and triggers, right? So like finding the glimmers in the thing that stresses you out so that it gives you that connection.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding the why, or how this could be meaningful and helpful. Yeah, absolutely. And not just seeing it as a drain. I think again, it's, we're talking about this, finding the meaning that fills you, and also like to understand that we, because what I find interesting with this whole self-care movement now, it's like, oh, well, if we care for ourselves, we can prevent burnout. But often we are, it's sort of understood in a very sort of one-dimensional way. Like, oh, self-care means going for a massage, which there's nothing wrong with going for a massage. I mean, I'm so happy you got a massage for your birthday yesterday, Lewis.
It was great, phenomenal.
But there's so many other aspects of ourselves that need tending to, and it may, we need to look at our whole being. Like our spiritual aspects. What are we needing to fill ourselves up spiritually? What do we need emotionally? What do we need, nutritionally, socially? There's so many different aspects to us that help us maintain a balance and a full cup so that we can continue doing what we do.
Yeah, because these sort of simplistic solutions, right? Like take baths, go meditate. I've told my clients, go on vacation, get away, and yet they'll do that, and then they'll come back and still feel stressed 2 weeks later. So again, I think the narrative, around burnout, it has to be a little bigger than I'm doing too much, right? Well, there are a lot of people that do a lot and do too much, but they don't necessarily experience burnout because they derive a lot of meaning and purpose from their work. So, I think stress is depleting on our physical body, but it feels a little bit like this loss of purpose is depleting our soul.
Right, exactly, 100%.
Yeah,
so that there's a lot of information that's coming to you internally when you're experiencing a sort of overload or overwhelm. It's like, to get really curious about what that communication is from inside you, because there's obviously a deficit, there's something that you need to look at, there's something that's calling for attention. That we can't just sort of fill with cement, right? Just go and fill it with some sort of concrete cement, but really rather to sort of seek deeper and to ask those questions about what's really lacking here, what is it that would feel nourishing and meaningful for me. And that's a hard question to ask, like especially if, you know, a lot of burnout is occupational. And you know, those are big questions, you know, about if this job is not actually meeting me on a soul level, on a deeper level. Those are big questions. Those are
that may require big changes.
Right,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? Like, and that's scary.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And so it's, yeah, exactly. So we kind of tend to push and override until, you know, perhaps we get stopped in our tracks. We really have to ask those questions.
You know, one thing that comes to mind listening to everything is, so far we have burnout is a thing that happens. It happens when we notice that there is this disconnect. In that disconnect, we feel like we're starting to lose a sense of the why, right? Like the drive behind the thing that we're doing. And in that loss of connection, there's a lot of variables that kind of come into play, right? It's almost like the inner machinations, the rationalizations fed by that, like that part of us that is now growing. It's almost like the little imposter that starts to feed, and then it grows and grows, and then it starts saying these things sometimes, right? You know, one thing that, just kind of thinking right now, with a lot of burnout, you know, like in sessions, like when I've had these conversations with people, it's, you know, I feel like I've lost a lot of my purpose. I feel like I'm just working for the sake of working. You know, I feel like, what was one? I'm just pumping paychecks. And then we kind of slow it down, and the baths, the massages, okay, that's good to get the physiological stuff back into a homeostasis. But getting to the root of, okay, well, when was the last time that you did the thing that you really enjoyed? Right?
Yeah.
Outside of the work.
Right.
And sometimes you got to reconnect back to that so that you can remember who you are, right? I think of like Lion King, if you guys have ever seen that. When Simba's looking up at the clouds and then Mufasa looks and he's like, remember who you are.
I love that. I love that.
Because we get lost in that, you know?
So true.
Well, and it feels like we live in a culture that continues to reinforce, you know, this sort of machine mentality, right? We're human doings, not human beings.
100%.
And you know, we're driven by, you know, be more productive, produce more, do more, work more, and yet we're never conditioned to ask the questions about what's valuable, what's meaningful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that question. That what you brought from the Lion King. You know, it's the big question. You know, remember who you are. Take enough time to ask those deeper questions that are scary and are, you know, could create a lot of big changes in your life. But can we take those? Can we read the signs? Because I think this is the thing too, is that, you know, burnout, it begins to happen. And I love what you were talking about with the sort of imposter syndrome, because in imposter syndrome, there's a disconnect from who I really am and who I'm putting out in the world. So I always think when a client comes to me with imposter syndrome, I'm like, actually, that is an imposter. You are not fully connected to who you are bringing. You are not bringing your full self into the world. You're putting a persona out into the world. So I like to sort of explore that disconnection between who I'm showing up in the world as and what's really going on inside of me, and how do we build those sort of bridges,
especially in a social media driven world where imposter syndrome is basically, you know, how social media runs.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's all about what we present to the world, the personas that we present to the world, and of course we're going to experience burnout because those personas are only, you know, they're only a mask deep. So there's not, there we go, where's the purpose and the meaning and the real authenticity of connection from the inside that we can bring into the you know, into the work that we're doing.
It seems a little bit like a privileged question to ask ourselves, though, right? I mean, we think about just the state of the world and the culture we live in, and just people who have to do the day-to-day. I mean, they don't have a choice. They have to work 3 jobs, and they have to do this to put food on the table. So this is where I keep coming back to, like, I don't think these individual solutions are super effective, right? Like they are to an extent, but the nervous system always kind of knows when we're not aligned,
Yeah.
right? And at
100%.
some point, that's when we feel burnout.
Yeah,
You know, so what do we need from the culture? What do we need?
So, I think of, you guys ever heard of, flow psychology, this flow state?
Uh-huh.
So, what was his name? I may or may not butcher it, but his name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Oh yeah, that was
And
good.
there were 2 people that really stood out in this kind of comparative analysis about flow. One was this high-powered woman who's, the weight of her decisions really held a lot, right? And she was under a lot of stress, constantly doing things, being transported all over the place. And then the other one was this guy who worked in a factory, and his primary function in that factory was to drill these same screws in the same pattern, right, on an assembly line. And when he interviewed both of them, their responses demonstrated the same kind of flow state. And that's what really led into the curiosity of, like, well, what is that flow state? And the reason I bring this up, kind of like to tie it in, because you're right, there are people that do not have the choice, that you have to work 3 jobs, you have to feed your family, you have to pay your rent, right? And in this specific example, he identified that these 2 individuals felt the same exact flow state of optimal performance, optimal experience, engagement, where time and essence, everything disappeared. She, because the weight of her decisions and everything was very high stress, and she was constantly matching her challenge with her behavior. Him, because the way that he put it was, I just kept trying to push my record. And it's so simple, such a simple little pivot, right? That it suddenly shifted the mundane into a challenge. And once the challenge component was added, there was this aspect of, I need to meet that challenge. I want to break my last record of how fast I did the drilling in this last one. And in a way, you can even look at it that he ascribed his own meaning to it.
Yeah. So and brought in a lot of intention, right?
Yeah.
So intention is important here. Otherwise, we become mindless, and then we're just in a habit of doing things.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then we're not firing on all pistons, basically. We're not firing on all of ourselves. So there's a part of us that feels empty. While he attributed meaning, he found a way to challenge himself and to be involved and engaged.
And it doesn't, it brings to mind too, like, meaning doesn't have to be derived from getting pleasure from something, right? Like, it's not like we're saying all this has to be fun, right? Because your 2 examples, I think, really demonstrate how these ordinary tasks can be meaningful and intentional.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not about pleasure. It's which is really interesting, because this whole self-care movement, that's we're talking a lot about how can I feel pleasure, how can I feel better, how can I feel good, and it's not always about that. I mean, I think about something like Viktor Frankl and how he wrote Man's Search for Meaning, in really difficult circumstances in the Holocaust, in Holocaust camps, finding meaning was, what really kept their spirit alive, and enabled, many people to get through some very horrific situations. So it's not necessarily about, because now we're talking about what gives you that motivation to actually get through something, is finding meaning in sometimes the hardest, most difficult times. That can be very enlivening, actually, and very ensouling.
And yet at the same time, just playing devil's advocate a little bit, like, I think it's terrible when people often say, after something happens, right? Oh, well, there's a greater meaning and everything has a purpose. And while that may all be well and good and true, it's also not helpful in that moment. It's sometimes people need to just sit in the mess,
Absolutely.
and in the discomfort.
Yeah, you grow through that discomfort in a lot. Well, so there's a difference, I think. Sitting in the fire for the sake of sitting in the fire versus sitting in the fire for the sake of, what's behind this flame. Right? I think that a lot
of
of
process.
Yeah.
Like if you're in the process as opposed to getting stuck.
Right, yeah. And then we get kind of fixated on that, right? And then we don't want it to kind of ruminate. Like in our practices, we meet with people and we have individuals come in and it's, I've done this time and time again. I've played this scenario over and over. I've done this situation time and again. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we can do it together. Maybe we can see the pattern and maybe we can unstuck it, right? Instead of it being a circle, maybe we can turn it into a spiral somehow, right? And then maybe just a tiny little shift in perspective. And then suddenly we have that meaning. We have that growth that we're looking for. The spark.
Spark.
Yeah.
It's like that inner spark, like what actually turns you on, that gives you that stamina to get through it. Yeah.
So, we started off talking about burnout. And it's funny, like we're talking about burnout and now we're talking about meaning and we're talking about finding meaning. And like, what a human conversation.
Yes.
Like, man, I'm stressed out at my job. And then we take that thread and then we follow it. And it's funny how it always comes down in some way, shape, or form to this very humanistic component, this part of the human condition that really feeds everything. And I think it goes into like what you're talking about with the social media. We really, if we narrow our lens too much, we get fixated on that tiny piece and then we lose that spark because this is it. But if we allow ourselves to open up a bit, to widen the lens, we can go back and trace it back and be like, this is something a little deeper than what it is, right?
So instead of talking about coping, for instance, maybe we want to talk about understanding. Or instead of talking about how we survive a situation, how do we thrive?
Instead of tolerating, how do we learn how to accept the things we can't really control and find some kind of peace within these things? Right?
Instead of always trying to problem solve, how do we learn how to realign? Right? What we're feeling internally with what we're experiencing in the world.
Yeah, how do we learn to sit deeper into it and actually open to just there's so much life inside of us to explore.
I wonder if there's something that we can give all of our listeners, something that we can give everyone, something of a little spark, something of a perceptual shift. There's 360 degrees in a circle. You don't need to go around the whole clock. You just need to go one tick mark. What's something that we can give everyone to help them make that one little tick mark, even today?
Well, a tool that comes to my mind that I use quite often, I call it a self-orientation tool. And it's about asking yourself 3 questions. What do I feel? What do I need? And what am I going to do about it? And checking in with these 3 questions, not only on a physical level, but asking yourself, what do I feel, need, and do on a spiritual level? What do I feel, need, and do on a nutritional level, on a social level? And going and just stopping and checking in with yourself. So that's a tool that I like to use, a self-orientation.
So it was, what do you what? What
feel? What do you feel? What do you need?
What do you need?
And what are you going to do about it?
And what are you going to do about it? Feel, need, do. I love that. Yeah, really nice. It's nice back pocket.
And looking at it within as a whole person. Yeah. So in all our different aspects.
Like feel, need, do. Because you're identifying it, you're naming it.
And you're taking responsibility.
And you've taken responsibility about it.
For responding to it.
Love
I like to do sometimes just simple values clarification, but let's really examine what it is you value, and then let's look at how you're living your life, and let's see how matched those things are, and if there's a real misalignment, how do we work on connection